I was in the middle of analyzing a serum batch when my phone started vibrating on the corner of my workstation, violently, like it had something urgent to say. Marley, sister. The name popped up on my screen like a ghost from a half-forgotten past. I stared at it for a moment. My lab was unusually quiet that morning. The other technicians had gone to the quarterly compliance meeting I'd skipped out on, claiming a migraine I didn't have. My head was fine. My heart, that was another story. I hadn't heard from Marley in almost 6 months. Not since Thanksgiving, when she stormed out of my house after screaming at me across the dinner table that I didn't deserve to be a mother if I wasn't even going to try. That had been about my embryos. Frozen. Stored. Untouched. My plan B in a world that rarely honored plan A. Now she was calling. Against my better judgment, I swiped to answer. Marley. There was a pause. A soft inhale. Then her voice, thin, tight, like she was trying too hard to sound casual. Hey, do you have a second? I leaned back in my chair and glanced at the giant timer ticking down on my centrifuge. Not really. I'm in the middle of something for work. Can this wait? I mean, no, not really, she said, with a shaky laugh that didn't sound like her at all. It's important. Something was wrong. I could hear it, not in her words, but in what she wasn't saying. Marley had never been good at hiding guilt. Her tone was off, and there was this faint background hum. No, not a hum, a kind of sterile echo. My brain clicked through the possibilities like a Rolodex. Clinic. It sounded like she was in a medical facility. I sat up straighter. What's going on? She was silent for a full beat. Then, in the smallest voice I'd ever heard from her, I'm pregnant. My stomach dropped. Okay, I said slowly. Congrats. I mean, she said quickly, rushing the words now, I know this is weird and sudden and I didn't know how else to tell you. I frowned. Marley, what are you talking about? Another long pause. Then she said 2 words that didn't make any sense. Not at first. It's yours. I blinked. What? And then, very quietly, almost like she hoped if she said it fast enough, it wouldn't sound as bad. I used one of your embryos. The world around me stopped moving. I swear the hum of the lab machinery dropped out. I could feel the silence crawling into my ears. You did what? Her words spilled out like water from a cracked glass. Look, I know I should have told you, but you weren't doing anything with them. And Carter and I were desperate, and the window was closing, and you stole my embryo? I said, voice rising without my permission. My heart thundered in my chest. I didn't steal it, she snapped, her defensiveness kicking in like an old reflex. I used it. I gave it life. That's what you wanted, right? I was standing now, my chair screeching back across the linoleum floor. My coworker Andy poked his head into the lab from the hallway, eyebrows raised. I turned away from the window and lowered my voice. Marley, tell me exactly what you did. From the beginning. Now. She sighed, like I was being dramatic. Look, you had those embryos sitting in storage for years, Nora. You were always too scared to actually do anything with them. You thought you could take my child without asking me? It's not a child yet, she snapped. It's a pregnancy. And it's mine now. I'm the one carrying it. I'm the one giving it a home. I felt something inside me snap. Stop. Just stop talking. My voice was ice. Calm. But cold in a way I didn't recognize in myself. Because something about her tone, the righteousness, the complete lack of remorse, made me realize something awful. She didn't think she'd done anything wrong. How did you even get access to the embryo? She didn't answer. Marley, I repeated, how did you? You used to log into that stupid portal on your laptop all the time, she mumbled. Your password was your cat's name and your birth year. It wasn't hard. I just updated the consent form, uploaded a signature. She sounded almost proud, like she'd hacked a vending machine. My throat felt dry. I couldn't speak for several seconds. You forged my consent. You impersonated me and used my embryo. That is fraud. That's theft. That's family, she interrupted with a sniff. You're making this uglier than it has to be. There it was. The classic Marley spin. Dress betrayal in the language of love. Paint herself as the hero. I couldn't breathe. I pressed one hand against the cold stainless steel of the countertop just to stay upright. I need to go, I said. Nora, wait. But I already hung up. I stared at the call screen, her name still glowing there like a burn on my palm. Then I did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I called my lawyer. The Midtown Fertility Institute sat tucked between 2 identical corporate buildings on the edge of downtown Asheville. Gray, sleek, clinical. I remember the first time I walked through its doors, a hopeful bundle of nerves clinging to pamphlets with phrases like, "Preserve your future," and "Empower your reproductive choices." Funny how those words felt like a punchline now. By the time I pulled into the parking lot that afternoon, I hadn't slept. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I stared at the reflective glass facade, wondering how much of my life had already been rewritten without me. The front desk receptionist, a young woman named Candace with perfect eyeliner and a robotic smile, looked up from her monitor. "Hi. Do you have an appointment?" I tried to keep my voice even. "I need to speak to someone from your legal or compliance department. Immediately." Her smile dimmed slightly. "I'm sorry, but we don't." "This is regarding unauthorized access and use of my genetic material," I said, louder now. "My embryo. My sister used it. Without my consent." Candace blinked. One moment, please." She vanished into a side office, heels clicking fast across tile. Minutes later, I was ushered into a sterile white conference room by a man with tortoiseshell glasses and the kind of apologetic professionalism that screamed, "We're already prepping a settlement offer." "Ms. Everett," he said, shaking my hand with both of his like he was trying to absorb the tension right out of my skin. "I'm David Lee, General Counsel for Midtown. We just learned about this situation ourselves." "You just learned," I echoed, trying not to explode. "She's nearly 10 weeks pregnant." His smile faltered. "Yes, we understand the severity. That's why we've paused all embryo transfers until we can complete a full investigation." "Too late for that, don't you think?" I slammed a file down on the table, a printout of my last signed consent form. My signature. Dated 2 years ago. No updates. No changes. He nodded grimly. "According to our system," he said, pulling out his tablet, "you logged into the patient portal on March 3rd, updated your embryo release authorization, and signed a digital consent form assigning use of Embryo 2 to a Marley Everett." I stared at him. First of all, I didn't. Second of all, you're telling me your process lets patients reassign embryo rights with one login and no call or in-person verification. He winced. "There should have been a call," he admitted. "That step was missed." "Missed," I repeated flatly. He nodded. "We're conducting internal interviews. There may have been staff misconduct." Translation: someone got paid off. I leaned forward. "I want access logs. All login timestamps. IP addresses. The consent form she uploaded. And any recordings you have from transfer day. I know you record them, for patient records and liability." "We do. You'll have it all by end of day. I promise you, Ms. Everett, we take this extremely seriously." But I wasn't listening anymore. I was staring at the glowing image on his screen. A form with my name on it. My birthday. My patient ID number. A signature that looked almost exactly like mine, but not quite. The N in Nora was too tall. The E in Everett curled too wide. She'd practiced it. Probably watched me sign documents for years. On rent agreements. On birthday cards. On her college loan paperwork. She'd always been a great mimic. Back in my apartment, I sat on the edge of my bed, surrounded by unopened mail and laundry I no longer cared about. The sun had gone down, but I hadn't turned on any lights. Just me and the quiet, and the growing horror of what my sister had done. I pulled out the tiny flash drive the clinic had given me. On it, the consent documents. A blurry time-stamped security video of a woman with Marley's build arriving at the clinic, wearing a surgical mask, sunglasses, and a beanie. The front desk camera caught just enough of her profile. It was her. She didn't even try that hard to hide it. She had walked in there like she belonged, and they let her. She didn't just violate my trust. She impersonated me. Legally. Medically. Genetically. And the worst part? She knew she could get away with it. Later that night, I called Carter. He answered on the fourth ring, voice tired and wary. "Nora!" "I'm not calling to scream," I said quietly. A pause. "Okay." I took a breath. "Did you know?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "Not at first." I swallowed the hot spike of nausea that rose in my throat. "When?" 3 weeks ago," he admitted. "She told me we'd been matched with a donor embryo. That it was a miracle, how perfectly it lined up with her genetics. But then, I saw the name on one of the printouts she left on the kitchen counter. I confronted her. And you stayed." "I didn't want to believe it," he said, voice thick. "But I haven't touched her since. I've been sleeping at my brother's place." "Why didn't you call me?" "I didn't know how," he whispered. "I didn't know what to say." "Try starting with, 'I'm sorry.'" Silence. Then, "I am. For what it's worth, I didn't want this." "None of it." I believed him. But it didn't matter. Because Marley had wanted it. Badly enough to break laws, ethics, and the most sacred bond between sisters. And now, I had to decide what I was going to do about it. The next time Marley called, I didn't answer. She called again the next day. Then texted, "Please, just hear me out. You're blowing this out of proportion. You're being selfish again." That last one made me laugh. Out loud. Alone in my apartment at 1:30 a.m. with a glass of red wine and the clinic documents spread across my kitchen table like a crime scene. Again. Because that was always the story, wasn't it? Nora Everett, the selfish sister. The one who left home for a research fellowship in Seattle while Mom was going through chemo. The one who didn't want to babysit. The one who didn't drop everything to move back and support Marley through her second miscarriage. It didn't matter that I sent money, or that I flew back for every holiday, or that I sat by her hospital bed for 3 nights straight after her D&C, watching her sleep while pretending I wasn't quietly panicking about the dull ache in my own pelvis, the one that led to my cancer diagnosis 2 months later. That didn't count. None of it did. Because I had boundaries. And Marley saw every boundary as a betrayal. Now she had crossed the last one. I sat across from my attorney 2 days later, trying not to shake as I recounted everything. The embryo storage, the unauthorized access, the forged consent form. Her name was Sabrina Trujillo. Short, sharp-eyed, wore charcoal pantsuits, and spoke like every sentence she said was going into the official record. I liked her immediately. "This is complicated," she said, scanning the clinic records. "But not unprecedented." She pulled out a yellow legal pad and started drawing a triangle. "What we have here is a parentage conflict. Genetically, the embryo is yours. Physically, the pregnancy is hers. Emotionally, she trailed off. Well, that's where it gets ugly. I want custody, I said, of the baby. When it's born. She didn't blink. You're within your rights to pursue that. But you need to understand something very clearly. This will get public if she fights back. She will. And she'll weaponize your cancer, your decision to freeze the embryos, your abandonment. Anything she can spin. You ready for that? I nodded. She's already doing it. That weekend, my parents invited me to brunch. That should have been my first red flag. They never invite me to anything unless there's emotional landmines involved. We met at a painfully quaint cafe in Biltmore Village. My mother had already ordered mimosas. My father sat stiffly across from her, holding a menu he clearly wasn't reading. We just want to talk, Mom began, her voice pitched in that fake light way she used during church fundraisers. About Marley. I took a sip of my espresso. Bitter. Scalding. Let me guess. She's the real victim here. My dad looked at me sharply. Don't do that. Do what? Be cruel. I laughed. Cruel? She committed fraud and stole my child. You want to talk about cruel? She didn't steal honey, Mom said. She made a mistake. She made a baby. With my DNA. Without my permission. And you want me to forgive that? She's pregnant, Nora, Dad said. You know what she's been through. How many times she's miscarried. What this means to her. I stared at him. What it means to her. What about what it means to me? My voice was rising. Heads turned at nearby tables. I went through chemotherapy so I could freeze those embryos. I injected myself with hormones until I was covered in bruises. I signed paperwork. I paid storage fees for 3 years. And she waltzed in and signed a fake name on a form, and now I'm just supposed to let it go. Would you really take the baby away from her? Mom whispered. That question gutted me. Because they weren't here to support me. They were here to guilt me into compliance. She took something that didn't belong to her, I said quietly. Now she has to live with the consequences. Mom looked down at her mimosa, suddenly fascinated by the bubbles. Don't expect her to ever forgive you, Dad said. I'm not asking her to, I replied. I'm expecting a court to believe me. I got the first threatening note 3 days later. It was taped to the windshield of my car, in a Ziploc bag to protect it from rain. You're not fit to be a mother. Give it up before you ruin another life. No name. No handwriting I recognized. But the implication was clear. And it was only the beginning. By the end of that week, I'd stopped opening my own mail. Everything felt like a threat, even the normal stuff. Credit card offers. Lab supply catalogs. Grocery coupons. It didn't matter. Every envelope might have contained another anonymous note, another handwritten dagger slipped between my ribs. But it wasn't just the notes. It was the silence. From Marley. From my parents. From Carter. From the world, as if the moment I filed the court documents, I became radioactive. People knew. I could feel it. The looks in the grocery store. The way one of my colleagues paused when I entered the break room. The half-second it took for conversations to shift when I walked in. As if I had somehow become the villain in the story Marley had rewritten. The woman trying to rip a baby from her pregnant sister. Not the victim. Not the one who'd been betrayed. Just the ice queen with the legal team. Sabrina, my lawyer, was ruthless. In the best way. We're not just going after custody, she said during our third meeting. We're building a case for full parental rights. Biological, legal, ethical. The works. How do we prove it's mine without a DNA test? I asked. We can't, she admitted. Not yet. But what we can do is prove Marley obtained the embryo through fraud, and that Midtown failed to follow proper chain of custody protocol. Once the baby is born, we file for immediate DNA verification and emergency guardianship. I nodded, but my hands were clammy. My body felt foreign, as if I were watching all this from the outside. And if they prove I abandoned the embryos? They can't, Sabrina said. You paid all fees. Never signed a release. Their entire process depends on the integrity of consent. That's our lever. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was working behind the scenes, pushing things, muddying waters, pulling strings. That's when I got the email. Subject line: she paid off someone. I can prove it. No greeting. No signature. Just a burner address and an attachment titled midtown_transferlogs.pdf. My fingers hesitated over the trackpad. I scanned the file for viruses. Nothing malicious, just a spreadsheet. Employee activity at Midtown for the week my embryo was transferred. And one entry, in particular, that stopped my heart. Nurse ID, number 3427, record override access, consent verification, bypassed. Timestamp, March 2nd, 3:43 p.m. I recognized the ID prefix. Midtown used it for all back-office medical personnel. Whoever sent this had access. There was also a note in the email body, barely a line. Check financials tied to the employee. There was a $5,000 deposit 2 days later. She used her boyfriend's account. This was bigger than Marley forging a signature. She'd bribed a staff member. I forwarded the email to Sabrina, who nearly fell out of her chair. Where the hell did this come from? She asked. No idea. No name. No follow-up. Whoever it is, they're trying to stay out of this officially, she said, scrolling rapidly through the logs. But this is a smoking gun. Will the court take it seriously? Once we corroborate it with financial records? Absolutely. She leaned forward. This just changed everything. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of anxiety, though it had become a regular guest in my bed, but because of something else. Something I couldn't quite name. I'd been running on anger, legal fuel, righteous fury. But now it was personal. Someone at the clinic had been bought. Complicit. They'd looked at my records, my name, my history, and decided $5,000 was worth more than my bodily autonomy. They hadn't just betrayed ethics. They'd betrayed me. And for what? A bonus. Rent. I stared out my bedroom window at 3:17 a.m., watching headlights drift down the wet street. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. It was a conspiracy, and I was going to tear it open with both hands. I showed up at Marley's house on a Tuesday. Unannounced. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. But what I didn't expect was the baby shower decorations in her living room. Pink and gold balloons. A table covered in pastel cupcakes. A printed banner that read, "Baby Everly is on her way." Everly. I hadn't even known the baby had a name. And somehow that felt like the cruelest cut of all, the way she'd already rewritten the story, renamed my child, repackaged her as a miracle instead of a theft. Marley froze when she saw me at the door. She was barefoot, wearing one of those wraparound maternity dresses that tried too hard to look casual. Her makeup was perfect, which made the twitch in her jaw even more satisfying. "You can't just come here," she said, not even pretending to smile. "Relax," I said. "No cameras. No lawyers. Just me." Her hand went instinctively to her stomach. A small, possessive gesture. Defensive. Territorial. "I heard you're throwing a gender reveal next week," I said, stepping inside before she could stop me. How festive. Does the guest of honor know she was conceived through felony fraud? You need to leave, she hissed. But I wasn't leaving. Not yet. I have the transfer logs, I said calmly. The ones with the staff override. The payment trail. The exact nurse you paid off. She blinked. A crack. Then her voice dropped to that sickeningly sweet register she used in high school when she was trying to talk her way out of detention. Look, I know it wasn't ideal. But the baby's healthy. Isn't that what matters? And she's coming into a family that loves her. She has a mother already, I snapped. And it's not you. Marley stepped forward, her eyes wild. Do you really think a judge is going to take a baby away from the woman who carried her? Who fed her, felt her kick, went to every appointment? I think a judge is going to look at the evidence, I said, and see a woman who impersonated her sister to gain access to a private medical procedure, committed consent fraud, and bribed a medical employee to bypass the law. Her face went white. You're bluffing. Try me. She stood there, shaking slightly. Her nails were painted pale pink, the same color as the nursery behind her, which I could now see through a half-open door. Tiny shoes lined up on a shelf. A stuffed giraffe in the crib. She had been building this life on a lie, and now it was collapsing. I'll tell the judge you gave me verbal permission, she said, desperate now. That we talked about it. That you said I could. I have recordings, I said smoothly. Texts. Witnesses. Every lie you've told me, I've documented. Silence. Then she laughed. A brittle, ugly sound. You've always been like this, she spat. Cold. Controlling. You don't know how to love anything unless you can schedule it and put it in a spreadsheet. I tilted my head. And you don't know how to survive unless you're the center of attention. She blinked again. This time it stung. I stepped closer. You didn't want a child, I whispered. You wanted a savior. A second chance. A miracle to parade around so you could stop feeling like the girl who failed. But you didn't create her. You stole her. And now you're going to lose her. For the first time, I saw something that looked like real fear in Marley's eyes. Good. I turned to leave. You should lawyer up, I said. You're going to need it. That night, a reporter called me. I wasn't surprised. Stories like this, they don't stay private for long. Ms. Everett, I'm with the Asheville Ledger. We received court documents pertaining to your pending legal dispute with your sister. Would you like to make a statement? I could have said no, but I didn't. Just one, I said. No one has the right to steal someone's child and expect to keep them. Not even family. The next morning, Marley's name was all over the internet. North Carolina woman accused of stealing sister's embryo, pregnant without consent. Comments exploded. Lines were drawn. Half the people called her a monster. The other half blamed me for tearing a baby from her mother. I read every single one. Then I turned off my phone and let the truth do what it does best. Burn slowly. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not physically. Emotionally. Like the air had been vacuum sealed, scrubbed clean of empathy. It smelled like furniture polish and paper, and maybe that's fitting, because that's what family becomes in places like this, redactions and exhibits. I sat on the plaintiff's side in a navy blue dress Sabrina picked for me. Authoritative but approachable, she'd said. Don't give the jury any excuses. There was no jury, of course. Just Judge Larrabee, a lean man with graying temples and a face that looked permanently unimpressed. Marley sat across from me. Her belly was unmistakable now. Nearly 7 months. She wore ivory and blush tones like she was auditioning for sainthood, but her expression gave her away. Tight mouth. darting eyes, fake composure. She looked terrified. And she should have been. The opening statement from Sabrina was surgical. Your Honor, this is not a custody dispute. This is identity theft. This is a violation of consent. This is the story of a woman who weaponized her relationship with her sister to take something she could never obtain legally. She paused, then added, until now, there was no precedent for this. But that doesn't mean there shouldn't be justice. Marley's attorney tried the angle we expected: maternal bond, gestational hardship, intent to parent. All smoke. They even trotted out the idea that I had abandoned the embryos. Then Sabrina dropped the bomb, the bribe. She presented the anonymous email, the financial records subpoenaed from the nurse's boyfriend's account, the metadata on the forged consent form, and the internal Midtown audit. The judge listened, impassively. But I saw it, the flicker. When Sabrina handed over the signed affidavit from the clinic employee, a terrified 24-year-old nurse who confessed to accepting a $5,000 payment from a close relative of the patient in exchange for expediting consent procedures, the entire case shifted. And then, the piece de resistance, the audio. The one I'd recorded when Marley left a voicemail 2 weeks after the transfer, back when she was trying to apologize. In it, her voice cracked with self-pity. I know I shouldn't have done it that way, but you weren't going to use them, and Carter and I, we needed this. You always get everything, Nora. I just wanted something for myself. It played for the entire courtroom, and when it ended, you could hear a pin drop. The judge recessed for 2 days. I spent most of that time sitting by myself in the botanical gardens, walking dirt paths lined with dogwoods and ferns, trying to find something, anything, in the natural world that could explain how sisters could become strangers. I watched a small girl chase a butterfly while her father called after her. And I wondered, will I be that parent? Will I know how to do this? Will she ever forgive me for being born into this mess? The ruling came on a Monday. I remember the sound of the rain tapping against the tall courtroom windows. Judge Larrabee adjusted his glasses, looked directly at Marley first. Ms. Everett, while your physical investment in this pregnancy is unquestionable, the court cannot overlook the extraordinary ethical and legal violations that led to its existence. Consent matters. Genetic identity matters. Law matters. Then he turned to me. Ms. Nora Everett, you are granted full legal and physical parental rights to the child upon birth. The respondent will be required to relinquish custody within 72 hours of delivery. I didn't cry. Not there. But I gripped Sabrina's hand so hard she winced. Marley's attorney stood, tried to object. Something about appeals, about trauma, about the sacred bond of birth, but it didn't matter. Because it was done. The verdict was in. And the child was mine. Marley didn't look at me as I left the courthouse. But I looked at her. And I saw the ruin in her expression, not because she lost, but because she never thought I'd fight this hard. She underestimated me. They always do. It happened at 3:17 a.m. on a Thursday. I got the call from Carter, of all people, his voice shaking. She's in labor, he said. Went into early contractions. I thought you'd want to know. I hadn't spoken to him since the trial. Not directly. But I could hear something in his voice now that hadn't been there before. Shame. Maybe even fear. Where? I asked. Mission Hospital. Maternity, East Wing. I was dressed and out the door before the line went dead. Hospitals at night are eerily quiet. Everything muffled. Noises behind walls. The smell of antiseptic and overscrubbed tile. I signed my name at the front desk, showed my court order, and waited under flickering fluorescent lights. It was surreal, being allowed in because of law, not blood. Marley's mother. My mother. Our mother. She wasn't there. Too embarrassed. Too confused. Too complicit. When the nurse finally stepped out, she didn't smile. Just nodded. She delivered 38 minutes ago. It was a girl. I knew it before she said it. A girl. My daughter. They let me see her an hour later. She was small, pink, angry somehow, swaddled like a burrito with a shock of dark hair and a furrowed little brow that made her look like she was already questioning everyone's decisions. Her name tag just said, Baby Girl Everett. Unnamed. Unclaimed. I stepped closer. The nurse left the room. And for the first time, I was alone with her. I didn't touch her right away. I stood still, hands trembling slightly. She was mine, and yet a stranger. She didn't know me. She'd spent the last 9 months inside the body of the one person I couldn't trust. I whispered to her, Hi, I'm Nora. And I'm your mom. Her eyes opened then, slate gray, unfocused. But for a second, I imagined she saw me. The handoff was brutal. Marley hadn't held the baby, they said. Refused to. Turned her face to the wall when the nurse offered. When I entered the room, she didn't look at me. She just said one thing. Her name was supposed to be Everly. I didn't respond. Because Marley didn't deserve an answer. She didn't deserve to name what she tried to steal. I named her Ilara. After a moon. After a myth. After something celestial and untouchable. Ilara Everett. Her birth certificate listed me as sole parent. No father. No shared guardian. No ambiguity. Just me. The first week was chaos. Formula. Diapers. 2 a.m. feedings. Legal follow-ups. I kept waiting for the crash, the day it would all hit me and I'd finally break down. But it never came. I'd been grieving this child since the moment Marley said, It's yours. I'd done the breakdown already. Quietly. In chapters. Now I was in a different mode. Protection. Clarity. Survival. 3 weeks after Ilara came home, I got a letter from Marley's attorney. Not a custody request. Not an appeal. Just one sentence. My client would like to request visitation rights. I didn't scream, or cry, or rage. I simply handed the letter to Sabrina. Tell her no. That night, I rocked Ilara to sleep in my living room. She'd started making tiny cooing sounds, like she was trying to speak some secret code only I could translate. The moonlight pooled through the windows. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel hollow. I felt full. Exhausted. Unshowered. Scared as hell. But full. This wasn't the revenge I'd planned. It was better. It was mine. 6 months later, my house smells like lavender and clean laundry. There are bottles on the counter, a tiny sock under the couch, and at least 2 pacifiers I'll never find again. My hair's always in a bun, I eat standing up, and sleep is a negotiation, but the air is different now. Lighter. Real. The ghosts are gone. I sold the condo 2 months after Ilara came home. Too many memories lived in those walls. The night I got Marley's call, the evenings I stayed up watching court footage, the morning I found that note on my windshield. I bought a small house on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. A garden out back. A rocking chair on the porch. Peace. The kind you earn, not inherit. I never responded to Marley's second request for visitation. She filed again. This time the judge denied her outright. No reconsideration. No review. No appeals. I haven't heard from her since. But I know she's still out there. Maybe watching, maybe stewing, maybe reinventing herself in some state where no one knows her past. She'll tell the story differently, I'm sure. She always did. But she doesn't get to write this ending. I do. At work, I went back part-time. Camden Labs held my position. Another quiet miracle. Turns out, When you take down a corrupt fertility clinic and win a landmark parentage case, people remember your name. Not just out of scandal, out of respect. Sabrina said I should consider writing a book. I laughed. Who would want to read about a woman suing her own sister? Then again, maybe someone would. Maybe someone needs to. There's something I do now that I never used to. When Alara's finally asleep, after the final bottle and the lullaby she's taken a strange liking to, I sit on the edge of the bed and write. Not always for long. Some nights it's just a sentence or two. But I write down what I've learned. So when she's old enough and curious enough, she'll know everything. Not just the what, but the why. Why her name is Ilara. Why I fought so hard. Why her beginning wasn't a shameful secret, but a battle worth waging. Why she's not a symbol or a prize or a miracle. She's a person. My daughter. And someday she'll read these pages and know that her story started with a theft, but ended with a choice. Mine. To take back what was mine. To become what I never thought I could be. To mother her, not out of obligation or survival or revenge, but out of love. Real, earned, unshakable love. They say revenge is sweet. It isn't. Not really. But freedom. Freedom is everything. And I have mine now. So does Ilara. And whatever comes next, we'll face it together. No lies. No games. No theft. Just truth. Just us.